Well, hello there. I'm Lexi, and this is the Prodigal's Purpose podcast. Today, we are going to really focus on live the conversion. And what we're going to focus on is when you become a follower of Jesus, when you become a Christian, when you have that faith piece in your life, what do you do after? Like the journey took forever, and then you finally get to your destination. Now what? And so whenever I'm like, okay, I need like a blueprint, I need a cheat sheet, somebody needs to show me or tell me how this is going to work, I immediately think of the apostles. And one of the last things Jesus told the apostles was go out to all the world and tell the good news. That's what they were supposed to do, was to go out to all these nations and tell the good news. And their leader was Peter. So I always like to look at Peter. Peter was assigned to go to Rome. And of all the places all the apostles went to, I would argue and say Rome was the worst because these other nations, these other places didn't know who this Jesus guy was. But Rome has been, micromanaging Jerusalem for a very long time. And this Jesus guy was a pain in their side. And now there's all these new Christians coming around. So he was walking in to the lion's den, basically. He really didn't get much of a fair chance of no one's going to know. I'm going to sneak in. I'm going to spread the word. He's walking into fire. It's not going to be great. And so he goes to Rome, and there are Christians being persecuted and martyred left and right. And so he is feeling super discouraged. He's like, I'm one guy. I can't do this. And so he actually dips. Peter starts running away from his problems. Me too. But he dips. He starts running away, and he's literally on the road leaving Rome. So he's leaving Rome. And as he's walking out of Rome, there's this man that kind of brushes his shoulder, passes him, and is walking towards Rome. And Peter takes a couple more steps, but then he stops. He's like, I know that guy from somewhere. And then all of a sudden, light bulb, he totally gets it. And he turns around and he yells, Quo Vadis, which means, translation, where are you going? Because the man that passed by him was Jesus Christ, the man he was following for 3 years. So he's like, where are you going? And Jesus turns around wearily and says, I'm going to Rome to be crucified again. And so this legend, it says that from this apparition or from seeing Jesus, Peter gains enough courage to go back to Rome to fulfill what God had called him to do. And ultimately, his life ended in crucifixion as well. So he really followed Christ's footsteps. So evangelization, that's the topic. That means sharing the faith. And that's not an easy task. I'm not going to kumbaya it to you. I'm not going to paint it up as some cute little Bible story or some easy task, really quick, take out the garbage, come back in. No, I would argue that after accepting God, first thing is consistency. I think that's really hard on ourselves. Second is being brave enough to share it. It's really, really hard to do. But I think it's something that if you truly have been changed by God, you are called to do it. And if you love Jesus, you're going to want to share it with others. But it's really intimidating. And I don't know where to start. And I don't know all the pieces and parts to do a good evangelization. And so this podcast and this episode especially, I would like to share what I have learned, both good and bad, what I have found most helpful, and maybe some stories of how I've seen God use me to be a part of other people getting to encounter him, which has been phenomenal and so amazing. But I also want you to know it is okay and it's totally normal if you're freaked out and you're like, I don't want to do this. This is terrifying. Same. Me too. I don't either. But I also think if we break it down, it doesn't have to be as big and as scary as we think it needs to be. Before we even talk about telling the other person about Jesus, let's just focus on you. Okay? You need to take care of you. It's like the oxygen mask in the airplane. You have to put on your oxygen mask before you help somebody else. Because if you ain't got no oxygen, you're between blue in the face, you're not going to be very helpful for your passenger, right? That's the same with your faith. Do you really think you are going to be the best version of yourself, and also the best, we're not perfect, but the best representation of Christ if you're not going to church, if you're not reading the word, and if you're not putting in the work. Like anytime we want to get better at something, we practice. We put in those hours. We don't just show up to the games and like expect us to just dominate. And that's the same with our faith too. You're probably not going to have much confidence and be very comfortable telling somebody about God if you haven't spent any time with God. So you should actually really prioritize yourself. And the other thing too that's really important is you should constantly be challenging yourself. Like I said, practice makes us better, but also who is leading that practice for you? So, an example, if you want to get better at basketball, you go to practice and you get yourself a really good coach. Now, would you rather have me or Coach K? You're going to want Coach K. I barely know how to dribble. You're going to want Coach K. You want an expert in your area, okay? And so what that means is maybe you partake in a Bible study and you learn from somebody else. Maybe you get yourself a spiritual director who can help and guide you. Maybe you spend time with people who are a little bit further in their faith journey than you and learn from them. That's how you get better, and that's how you get stronger and deeper, okay? So you really do need to take care of you and your spiritual needs, and you also still need to be growing in your own faith before you can expect to start sharing and acting like king of the hill and the master of this, because honey, this ain't your master class, okay? So number one, you should take care of yourself. But if we look at evangelizing, I would say there's like 5 key steps that I've learned and that people have shared with me that I feel make evangelization, so sharing God, the most effective. Okay, there's 5 steps. Number 1 is prayer. You need to pray for that person or those people, all right? Pray that they are open to encountering God. Maybe pray if there are some hardships or struggles that they're facing, because a lot of times the busyness and the hardships of this world can really distract us and tear us away from God. But just praying for them and also including God into this of like, hey, God, join us in this moment or in this conversation, and please help guide it to lead closer to you. Prayer is number 1, and prayer is very, very important. Number 2 is relationship, the right to be heard. I am not that bold. And at first, when I heard about evangelization, I don't want to be that guy standing on a curb screaming, follow Jesus or burn in hell, okay? Like, no. And if I was just walking up to random people and saying, you need to know Jesus, you need to learn about Jesus, you need to do this, I'm probably not going to get the best reaction. Maybe something happens. You never know what God does with you. But it might not be the most fruitful. And so it's really good to pause and look at your life and see, okay, look at my environment, look at my people. Where can I share my faith and it would be received and it would be accepted? A senior on, again, basketball. Sorry. I'm a basketball family, but I can't play, so it's weird, but I know I don't know. I am around basketball. Okay, so we're going to use the basketball analogy. A senior on a basketball team is going to be able to influence his teammates. Why? Because he has relationship with them. He knows them. He has experienced life through them. He puts blood, sweat, and tears in practice. That he would probably be received pretty well if he wanted one day after practice to talk to a friend about his faith. Okay? If I walked into practice one day, I don't know a single person, I haven't touched a ball, and I start preaching, it's going to be weird and I'm definitely going to get kicked out. So relationship is super important, and understanding your environment. So thinking of myself, I'm a teacher at a Catholic school. I definitely have influence over my kids. I have influence over my friends. I have influence over my coworkers. I have influence with my family. Like your bubbles, look at your bubbles of where you put time and energy and love, and that is where the word would be best heard. You have to build that relationship, okay? Number 3 is questions and listening. When we get really excited, or at least this is my problem, I want to tell everybody everything about my news. That's going to freak people out. But also, there might be very legit reasons why somebody is not Team Jesus. There just might. And so shutting up, which is really hard for me to do, zipping your lid and just being a good listener. And when they ask those questions, validating, like, that's a great question, or you know what, I actually had problems with this too. That is huge. Because a lot of times when we're hurting and if we feel safe enough to open up, we don't want to be swatted with, oh my goodness, you are so wrong and here's 10 reasons why. Wrong answer. That's terrible. You're not nice. Don't do that. But sitting, listening, acknowledging their questions, and reading the room and reading that person of if they're pouring their heart out at you and it's just hard to say the problems or things that they're having, they probably don't want a 45-minute lecture. They just want to feel community and connection. And you're being Jesus to them by doing that. And maybe answering that question will be better down the road, but not right now. But the questioning and listening, you need to feel like a safe place for them. And you need to respect them and where they're at. 4, invitation. Stop being chicken and just ask them to join you. Ask them to join you for Mass. Ask them to go for a cup of coffee. Ask them, invite them, and you can even make it fun. You can literally say, hey, do you want to go to church with me? And then we can stuff our faces at Village Inn. I'm buying. Like, you can have fun with it too. And don't feel discouraged if they say no. You just keep asking, but you have to invite them. It's pretty hard for someone to go out of their way and say, like, can I go to your church? Be the first one to make the move and invite them and make them know that and feel that they're really welcome. The last one is be a witness. You should be, keyword, joyfully living out your faith. If you are eye rolling and grumpy and sighing and complaining about going to church, or you're constantly just talking down to people, who wants to go to your church, dude? Like, it'd probably just be full of miserable, grumpy, self-absorbed people. You have to joyfully live out the faith. You have to have someone say, what are they doing in their life that's different than mine? And like, why? They like live with purpose. Like, they seem like really whole and really happy with who they are and where their life is. And maybe sometimes, like, the thing is too, is like, especially when the math doesn't math, like when they shouldn't be happy, they're still happy. You need to be a witness and you need to live out your faith in that way. Another thing about being a witness is eventually when your relationship is built, you really should share your testimony. I think sharing your story and relating to somebody, here's where I was and here's where I started, it can really help them see how God worked in your life, maybe help them reflect of where God's working in their life, but also know that we all start somewhere and it's not always the prettiest. And so those are the 5 things that I think are super important for evangelization: prayer, relationship, question and listening, invitation, and being a witness. Okay? Cute. But Lexi, you don't know the people I'm dealing with. Pause. Yes, I do. Okay? The 2 people that you're probably going to be encountering is what I would call the lukewarm or the cold. Lukewarm, they're like zombies. That's the best way to describe it. They're still moving, but they're just like, it's not that they're brain dead, but it's like they're like soul dead, okay? And what I mean by that is maybe they grew up in the faith, maybe they go to Mass sometimes, but their faith is so limited and very much going through the motions because there's truly not a relationship with God. There isn't a fire under that. And maybe it is real. Maybe they haven't encountered him yet, but they know about him and they know what they need to do, but there's just not a lot of doing it. When it comes to that, I think invitation is huge. And I think pairing it with something fun of, hey, you should totally come tonight. There's this really cool speaker. Or, hey, you should join me. I'm going to go to confession and then we can play sand volleyball later. Like, you can have fun with your faith and you can combine it into these fun things. But I think for them, nudging and inviting is huge. And also there's just something about doing it together and in community that makes it so much easier to do. Like, I remember I was that kid, like, I wasn't going to go to some church event, but if all 5 of my besties are going, oh my gosh, I'm definitely going. And you never know where, something might spark or a speaker really hits home, and that could be their starting point, and they have you to thank for that invitation. So first is like the lukewarm zombie is what I call them. They know, but they aren't doing, because they don't know God and have that encounter. They know Christmas and the sacraments and all the facts, but they don't know the reality of it and the relationship part of it. So there's lukewarm. Then there's just straight up cold. Cold is equivalent to their faith is dead. They don't know Jesus. They don't like Jesus. A lot of times they'll hate Jesus. And there are times where they may, not all of them, but sometimes they kind of go on the aggressive route where they don't want to hear about it either. And before I say anything, I think it's super important to stop and to just think about that person and just be in their shoes for a minute. You do not know what someone has gone through. None of us. None of us know what everyone has gone through and lived through. And, you don't know, okay? You don't know if this person was hurt by the church. You don't know if some Christian said or did something so hurtful or wrong that it left them either just straight up so disinterested in the faith, but also maybe it left him feeling like, wow, God, if they're that way and they believe in this Jesus, I don't want to follow a guy who allows that kind of behavior. You don't know if there's been some trauma in their life or some loss in their life that they're angry at God about and can't understand why a God would do something or allow something to happen like that. You just don't know. You don't know. You don't know. So before you start spitting facts and judging, you really need to see them as a human person, and you need to remember we all start at different places, and this is where the relationship part is huge. You need to love them for them, and you need to be the face of Christ to them, and maybe that's without even talking about Jesus, because again, we can't work miracles, only God can, but God can use us. And so loving them and being kind to them, and when it comes to sharing your faith, maybe meeting where they're comfortable, even if it's not where you are comfortable, where you want to share more, you need to stop and you need to see them and understand that there is probably a lot that you don't know. And so try to give them a little bit of mercy and a little bit of benefit of the doubt. Okay, this is probably the part I didn't want to go through, but this is the confession part. I thought that being a good Catholic meant that I had to act better than everybody, and I had the right to judge others. And so being my good Catholic, I was supposed to, no, I wasn't, point out what everyone else was doing wrong and let them know. I am sure I hurt people, and I am sure I turned people away from Jesus. And that is probably one of the ugliest realities or truths that I have to live by, is that I thought I was doing everything in the name of Jesus. And really, I was being so unchristlike to others. I mean, I was ballsy enough to call out people's sin and tell them that if they didn't fix things, they were going to hell. Quite the welcome wagon. And through a lot of prayer and reflecting, I realized that my actions weighed a lot more than I thought. And that the idea that my interaction with someone was leading them to never want to interact with God really broke my heart. And I own that, and I am so sorry for being that Judge Judy to some people. I thought I was coming from a good place, but reflecting, that is not what God calls us to do. And so I have really repented and reflected on that and prayed about that. And I've really tried to correct myself to never be that person again. And by saying this, it's not that God is calling us to never speak up out of concern for a friend, but it is very different, and that you need to remember that relationship is so important, because we go to and listen to and ask for advice to people we trust and people we know genuinely love us and want what's best for us. And so if we're just tearing people down left and right and we don't have that relationship and it's not coming from a loving place and it's not said in an appropriate situation and with love, it's not going to be received well. And it might push people away. And I know I've been victim to that, and I've learned from that. But there is a way to be honest and to help others without the finger pointing and the shame of it. And so that's also a really important thing to gauge, is to remember relationship is huge and probably the first and most important thing you have to do. But then afterwards, then that honesty piece just will naturally happen. And when you love somebody, you're not going to want to hurt them more than they're already hurting, you know? So that's my guilty confession, and it's kind of embarrassing. But on a lighter note, let's talk about Jesus. Yay, let's talk about Jesus. Do you know the verse in the Bible where Jesus says, I love you? Do you know the verse? There is no verse. Newsflash. Okay? I literally hunted it down and I double checked and I asked AI just to make sure I wasn't blind. There's literally no verse where Jesus just blatantly says, I love you. I love you, John. I love you, Mama Mary. Peter, you're my rock. I love you, bro. None of it. Never. And when I found that out, I kind of was like, aw, like that kind of sucks. Like that's kind of sad. No, but here's the deal. It's because Jesus is a genius, okay? Jesus is so smart. He doesn't have to say it. He does it, okay? Jesus is the human equivalent of a Nike swoosh. Okay, just do it. The only thing he really kind of says that nudges us on like love is love one another as I have loved you. Okay, he doesn't talk the talk, he walks that walk. All right? And I think that is so important for us to remember if we do want to share our faith, is you got to love like Jesus, not just say you love like Jesus. Okay, I've met people that have Bible verses memorized, but they don't know how to love. And they say they're followers of Christ, but they don't live it. And you got to check yourself and make sure, am I Nike swoosh Jesus? Am I doing it? Am I living it? And one of the best examples of Jesus just doing it, instead of the L on the forehead, it's like the Nike swoosh on the forehead. Yeah, that Nike swoosh. Just do it, Jesus. Either way, one of the greatest examples Jesus ever gave is literally when he's dying. So when Jesus was dying, he was hung on a cross. He went through torture before, but he's hung on the cross, and he's actually not alone. There are two criminals who are also crucified that day, and they're both still alive. And one of them is just mocking Jesus, just going at him. And he's like, wow, if you really say who you are, you should get down from this tree. Like, King of the Jews, like Son of God. Sure. Just mocking Jesus as he's taking his last breaths. And then there's another one, the penitent thief. And he actually corrects that criminal. And he's like, we committed the crimes that earned us this. Like, we did what we are accused of doing. This man is innocent. This man did no wrong. And so he actually stood up for Jesus. And if you think about it, there's really not much that this kid can gain. He's already dying, and he already did all these terrible things. And if you think about Jesus on that cross, he's not doing anything. He didn't perform some crazy miracle. He didn't give this amazing sermon from the cross. That thief knew there was something different about Jesus, and Jesus didn't even say or do anything to like show his divinity, but he did things through his action. He took a beating. He was scourged to death and then told he was going to be crucified, mocked, spit on, abandoned. And he did it all because he loves us. And that thief saw Jesus forgiving the men that were torturing and killing him. Jesus was living out our faith in the biggest way in those moments, sacrificing himself for us. And that's what gave the penitent thief confidence to turn to Jesus and say, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Saying, I want to go where you go. You're the real deal. And that is what Nike Swoosh Jesus is. He does it. And so when we evangelize or when we want to share our faith, you really have to think, it's not what I say. Am I doing it? Am I doing the faith? Am I Christ to them? Am I loving? Am I merciful? Am I forgiving? Am I understanding? Am I supporting them at their lowest lows? Am I loving them through it? That is a true Christian. And that is how you convert people or share the faith with people. Okay? And the other thing too, with Jesus being the example, is when we are living the faith, we also need to remember, how are we living the faith when things aren't going well? When you get your cross, do you fall down and just lay on the ground and whine and complain and say how unfair life is and just gripe? Or do you ask Jesus to help you pick that cross up? Because your witness and your testimony, just like Jesus on Calvary to that thief, your witness, carrying your suffering and inviting God into it, is a huge, huge way of actions speak louder than words, especially when it comes to living out our faith. One quote that really shook me to my core is from Father Mike Schmitz. He's a very quotable guy. And the quote goes, if it became illegal to be a follower of Christ, to be a Christian, and you were arrested and charged with this, would there be enough evidence in your life to charge you for committing that crime? Is there enough evidence? And I think a great goal is that every day when we wake up, are we building enough evidence for our case for Christ, our case to live for Christ and to be Christ-like to others? So my story time. Okay. Now, we've gotten to the part where we talked about how do you evangelize. We've gotten to the part about who do we evangelize. Now, this is where you're like, Lexi, you have it easy. You literally are on a podcast talking about Jesus. You were raised Catholic, so all your family's Catholic, so that's not a problem. You literally work at a Catholic church, so, like, yeah, it's really hard to evangelize. I know. But a couple years ago, I got myself a part-time job, and I got it because I was poor. Got it because I was poor, and I got it because I also just really wanted to meet some people. I was really lonely. And I was like, I definitely need money, but I also, like, I want friends. Like, I need good friends, and I want to meet friends I don't already know. Like, I want to pop my bubble. So this is the first time I am working or not in some kind of church or diocesan institute. Okay? I've definitely, for more than half my life, I've been in a Catholic something. So this is my first job where it's not a Catholic something. And I got a job at a gym. Free membership. I'm the front desk lady, okay? Still am today. And this is the first time I really, really interacted with people who could care less about Christianity. Because even my college was Catholic, okay? You were in the minority if you weren't Catholic at that college. So it was a very weird situation. But the gym world, and I'm a part of it, so I say this with a lot of love, it's very easy to see how the gym world can be very superficial, very egotistical, very much self-absorbed, and it would make sense to think there ain't much Jesus in that gym, because that's just kind of the environment it is a little bit. And I was working with coworkers who were from all walks of life. I had customers and members that were also walking all different walks of life. I mean, I had people bragging about how they were spending their weekend doing this, taking this, hooking up, drinking, partying, because that was what was most important in their life. I had people who did not believe in this Christian crap, as they called it, and were very loudly atheist, non-believers. And I also had people who believed in God but were straight up like mad at him, did not like him one bit. So that was a little different than me going to my Catholic school and saying our Hail Marys, right? Like, new territory for Lexi. I will also say there were other people too that were Christian as well. But with just the personality mix that we had, the not practicing non-believers were a lot more vocal and more comfortable in sharing that part of their life than I think us Christians were about sharing our faith. And I will say too, like all in all, there was like pretty good like mutual respect of like, you believe this, I believe that, okay. But it was just so different for me. And I was starting to really grow in my faith and get a little bit deeper. And I really committed to not shying away. Because in the past, like I'm thinking about the step being a witness. In the past, if somebody said, how was your weekend? What'd you do Sunday? I would skip over the part that I went to church. Or I wouldn't mention that I met with my Bible study. Like I would purposely cut out the Jesus parts of my life depending on who I was engaging and talking to. And I wanted to do better about that. And so once I started this job and started folding towels at the front desk, I kind of realized I'm like, this is a really good test for me to see how I handle sharing my faith. And I wasn't perfect, but I really tried. So these are some examples of things that I experienced, but also they might be little nuggets or tips for you. I'm a jewelry girl. I always wore my religious jewelry and my religious rings, and I have some bracelets. And so that sparked up tons of questions. Oh, where'd you get that necklace? Oh, it's a Sacred Heart. Well, what's a Sacred Heart? And then I would start talking to them about it. Or I had a Benedictine medal on my wrist and another guy was wearing a Benedictine medal and we bonded over that. And not shying away from that conversation, but actually explaining it. Or somebody would ask like, hey, what are you doing this week? And I said, oh, I'm leading a Bible study. And I know he didn't practice his faith, but he's like, well, like, what are you guys going to talk about? And it was great because for months following, anytime he'd bump into me at the gym, he would say, what's your Bible study doing now? And I would get a chance to share scripture. I had a coworker once who was a Christian, but he was kind of struggling with like building habits. And he calls them deep talks, but he likes asking like deep theological questions. And so he would like deep talk with me and we bonded over that. But he also was like, I want to get better about my faith. And I'm like, you need to get to know Jesus better. Like, how about you read the Gospel of John? And so I would challenge him and poke him it was like a funny inside joke. I'd be like, how's John going? He's like, chapter 5. And whenever we had a shift together, we got a chance to discuss it and share with it. And that was just really fun. So eventually I was and still am dubbed the Jesus girl. If I had a slow moment in my shift, instead of scrolling my phone, I started reading books. And guess what? I like to read books about my faith. And I had a lot of people say, what are you reading? And I got to share it with them and we got to discuss things. Or they're like, wow, like that's a good recommendation. I want to write that down. Members and coworkers alike. And it also sparked some really good, back and forth conversation of, oh, I used to be Catholic, or, oh yeah, I've read that book. It is really good. And I've gotten even more bold lately. Instead of like waiting till I get home to pray my rosary, I pray my rosary on the treadmill. I pray my rosary on the treadmill. And you should see how many people think it's so weird that I'm holding a necklace while I'm on my walk. But that's been a really fun conversation too. But either way, it is just so real to say that just living your faith a little bit more loudly can speak volumes to people. Like I had one guy, he pulled me to the side. He's like, every time I'm in here, you're happy. Like, why are you so like joyful? Like, why are you so happy? And trust me, Lexi is not sunshine and rainbows. I'm a storm cloud a lot, but I use this as an opportunity. And I'm like, God's just really good and I've been blessed. And he just stared at me. And I was like, I'm blessed. And he's like, okay. And then he walked away. But I think that nudged him or made him think just that one answer and the way I answered it. I will also be honest that there are times when it hasn't gone well. So I'm going to talk about this story. And I say this with a lot of love. So just keep that in mind. There's a lot of teenagers or young adults that go to the gym. Okay, everybody wants to bulk and, have a good pump and all that garbage. But there was this young man who came into the gym and he was quite the character. And he definitely had a chip on his shoulder. And I didn't know why. But he always hung around the front desk. And I worked the front desk and I also lift there. So he hung around the front desk or he'd see me lifting. And I have a dark humor too, but he has a very dark humor. And with dark humor, there's this very thin or fine line where, yes, dark humor, like it's just funny because you can't, it's like the shock factor of it all. But also when certain jokes are constantly repeated, there's truth in it. There's like a wound in it or there's hurt in it, especially if it's self-deprecating or something. But once he found out that I went to Pius, he gave me a lot of colorful nicknames, Pius Girl and all that stuff. And he would say crude things to try to get a reaction out of me, like inappropriate jokes or comments, because he knew I was a Jesus girl. He would call me names. He would say a lot of negative things about God or about my faith. And it just felt like he was trying to make it really personal. And it was really hard to take. But there's also times where he would make these comments or jokes of like, man, I wish I was dead, and make these comments about killing himself. And just by being around him, I got to know, he's been on and off probation a lot, and he's not really close with his parents, or he's definitely never had like faith in his life. And all that really mattered was drinking and seeing how many girls he could sleep with. And he like loudly told me all of this. And it was weird and it was a lot, because there's times where he's just like word vomiting and it's hitting nerves. And then there's also times where like I almost felt like when nobody was looking, I'd see glimmers of like a genuine person or glimmers of someone who's hurting. And I don't know why, but we established this friendship, which with how I'm explaining how it started, this makes no sense. But I thought about it, especially the couple times I got really upset with some of the jokes he was saying at me. I just thought, how would Jesus look at him? And he would just see him as someone who is lost, someone who is hurt, and someone who doesn't know where to go and doesn't know who to trust. And that's a really lonely feeling. And just with his age, he just made me, I just started thinking about like my brothers, because they're kind of in that same age. And I just kind of saw him as this like lost little brother. And so we kind of got in this routine where he would stop at the desk, say these crude or terrible things, and I would just sigh and shake my head at him, and I say, I'm praying for you. And then he'd walk away. And I had a lot of coworkers who'd be like, how do you take that crap? Like I would want to, there were times Lexi wanted to punt him to Timbuktu too. I don't know. And as time went on, we started to kind of build this weird back and forth relationship. I think we were building relationship, even though it was like dark humor, jabby, negative, mean jokes, very reactive, anything, whatever. But there was one time I was going on a retreat and I felt really nudged, and I went out of my way to go up to him and I said, hey, I'm going on a retreat and I really want to pray for you. And before I could even finish, he cut me off. He's like, don't waste your prayers. They don't even work. Don't even do that to me. And I continued, and I'm like, no, like I'm going to pray for you whether you like it or not. But is there anything you want me to pray for? And he said no, and he stomped off, and he seemed kind of weird about it. But I was like, I felt nudged by the Holy Spirit to do something nice. I don't know. And I came back from my retreat, and he just seemed a little bit lighter and a little less mean jokes and jabby. And he just seemed a little bit more okay. So I'm going to take that as a dub. And now, I'm not saying this story as a success story because I still don't know. I didn't witness a major conversion. I don't think he's going to church or anything, but it's not our timing. It's God's timing. And I'm really, really hopeful, and I still pray for him a lot today. I hope he's doing better. He seems to be doing a lot better and making some better choices for himself. That makes me really happy. And, maybe my part in his return to God is just being that friendly face and that little nudge in the gym. And so I hope that gives you some courage, but also I hope you relate of like, Lexi knows what she's like. I've lived it. I know what you mean. And I know what it feels like to be scared or intimidated to go there with someone or to share it. But I also think that relationship piece was really huge for how he and I we're friends. Like, Now we're friends. But with that, you really have to trust God's timing in it all. And if you're still like, Lexi, even after all the stuff you said, I still don't want to do it, I think of, what if, God willing, one day you get to heaven? And when you get there, obviously God welcomes you, all the saints, the angels, your family, your closest friends, but also a huge group of people that are thanking you because of your interaction or because of your time here on earth and how you spent it. You shared your faith with them, and they get to go to heaven now too because they took advantage of what you were offering them. And they might be, your friend from college or your spouse or your kids, but it could also be that coworker you worked with for 2 months or that random person that you showed kindness to. Like, we don't know. And if you feel that, or if you see that, that should really motivate you and make you want to do better. And I challenge us as we walk down this journey of life, as people pass us and they say, Quo Vadis, if they say, hey, where are you going? I want us to be brave and confident to turn around and say, I'm going to heaven. Would you like to come with me? And invite them on that. So I hope you feel encouraged and maybe excited to share your faith after listening to this. If you don't and you're still nervous, totally fine, but I at least hope you don't feel as intimidated or see it as much of a task or a chore or a challenge. And if you're still really confused and torn about this God thing, I see you and I feel you, and I'm sorry. It's been a hard journey for you, but I am praying for you. And I ask all our listeners or anybody who can resonate with that, like, we've all been at that point where we question, where is God in my life? And so I'm praying especially for you. And we also want to pray that this podcast continues to do what God wills of it. And so I really challenge you this week to go out of your comfort zone and try something new and invite somebody into this beautiful journey we're taking together to Christ. And so please always remember to ponder the purpose, embrace the journey, and live the conversion. Thank you.